Okay, well, first of all, I've got probably far too many slides, but this is one of my problems because I can only do this if I think visually. And and I'm also going to be talking about the fact that this is really my territory coming from the visual. And I'm just reminded of one of my favorite poets' advice to an artist was that there are only three types of people that count in the world. One is a warrior who kills, one is a priest who has faith, and the other is a poet who creates. Everybody else needs to be taxed and drudged and relegated to the professions. So how does one maintain a status as a warrior, a priest, and a poet? Well, what we're talking about is that you need to be able to create, you need to have vision, you need to have faith in your vision, and you need to have to fight to make it work. So it's very, very true. And one of the other great pieces of advice I once got as a young student was from Ted Turner, who said his secret maxim, or his secret for success, was early to bed, early to rise, work like hell, and advertise. So this I also tell my students, because they have to start up with ideas which are just a hunch, just a mere clue, just a feather of an idea. And then they have to turn that into a sketch. They have to develop that as that little hunch that needs to grow. And as that idea grows, they need to start getting testing of the idea. They share it with their friends. If they find that the idea is too big for them, then they have to get help. Then they have to create a team, and then the idea can grow and grow and grow. And I grew up in the age of the Beatles. I think probably one of the most phenomenal things that happened in the 20th century was the advent of a band, pop bands, getting together. Just four people get together. Someone's playing lead, someone's playing rhythm, someone's playing drums, someone's playing bass, and together they change the world. They change the way people feel. They change the way people act. They change the way people think. And you don't need 25 people, you don't need 100 people, you don't need a tribe, you just need 4 or 5 good friends. And you need 4 or 5 good friends who can actually sing together, who actually kind of have a harmony together and can create, and can improvise together and actually create on the spot as a group. I think that was one of the biggest breakthroughs of the 20th century. And we're seeing it now today at a time when entrepreneurism and innovation and invention was never more needed. And I keep reading that this is the biggest time ever in our lives for innovation. So, I'm also very aware that the difference between invention and innovation is something that's very close to what we discover in the arts. In the arts, most artists want to get left alone so they can just keep inventing. But that can easily become just a hobby, unless you have innovation, where you actually take those inventions and you put them into practice. You apply them. How can you apply these inventions? And this is where you need to be more than a company of one. You need to be an association of other talents that come together. And while you're at a university like this, an institution like this is the time to meet your peers, to get together, to form ideas together, and to go to work together, so that when you actually leave this place, you're already running a company. That really would be my ideal to see, students today actually entering the fray as working artists. Okay, because art isn't such a big deal. Being a genius is not even such a big deal, and there isn't anything that you should ask of yourselves that's less than being a genius. Because to be a genius basically is that if you ever hear anybody say something really cool and you think that really hits the spot, don't repeat it. Find a way of saying it in your own voice. Find a way of finding it in your own experience and actually talking about that from that position, and you are a genius. That's genius. I mean, everybody thinks that so many things are running out and there's less to do and there's less to invent and there's less to make. It's not true. It's the same stuff. We have got the same problems that we've had since we were walking on 2 feet. And so it's just a question of finding your own way of finding your own personal vision for that. I'm going to show you work, first of all, that I've done as an artist and how I've actually sort of broken out of being in the studio as a lone artist into working in collaboration with other people. It started for me probably when I was a little kid, and my father used to go out and work on a building site, and I had no idea what he did on the building site. So I used to try and imagine what he did on the building site. Because, you know, when you haven't got something, you have to imagine it. When you're hungry, you have to imagine food. If you need love, and you haven't got love, you have to imagine love. And this is how everything gets started. So I tried to imagine what it was like being on a building site. And I grew up with a real need to work with architects. I wanted to meet people who made buildings. I wanted to act in buildings. And so this led me into the visual arts and the idea of being able to put something up that could actually command a space. But I really wanted to be able to work in tandem with the people who made the buildings. So let me start going through these slides and see if you can just, some of them will have to last for a very short period of time as we move through them. So when I was a student of 19, I saw this work by Henri Matisse, which is a ceramic, and it's now in Los Angeles. It was commissioned directly from him. And I started making a painting based on these fluttery shapes. And an architect who was also a member of faculty, who was a painter, came to my studio and he said to me, could you turn that into a room? Could I ever? I mean, I was just making paintings. So he said, well, you know, is there an application where you could turn that into ceramic? And so I discovered how Matisse did this with his ceramic transfer papers, where you screen on the ceramic ink onto paper, you can float it off and put it directly onto a white tile, and you fire it in an oven. And then the nightmare begins because you think you're going to lose all of your ceramics, everything's going to melt, and everything's going to crash and break. I had nightmares about it. But we did it. And I was 19 at the time, and it was an absolute harrowing experience, but it was wonderful to do it. And it was a taste, it was a bite of the cherry. When I left undergraduate school and graduate school, I went as far away from England as I possibly could get. And I went to study a school in Kyoto called the Rempah School, which was started in 1615. And it was an attempt to bring together different entrepreneurs of the day, different businesses, different companies that did had different functions. One of the artists, Honami Sotatsu, was a fan maker. And then there was Koetsu, who was a gardener. There was a whole slew of people that worked together, and they came together on each other's projects. Koetsu did poetry across Korin's paintings and across Sotatsu's paintings, and they collectively had a workshop that had a grant from the shogunate. And this was an extraordinary moment. It sort of was the kind of biggest inspiration of my life. And then I went on to study the other great moment in art history in the Western world, which was the Bauhaus, which built this institution where everybody worked on the concept of a cathedral, like, you know, a huge, everybody working towards an apotheosis of their talent in this great edifice of the cathedral. But while I was in Japan, it was also an education with nature. I came back to England and started working in a studio where I was able to get space for 28 pence a square foot on the docks in London. Nobody else wanted to work there. As soon as I went down there the first day, somebody ripped up my motorcycle and trashed it. And everybody said, you must be kidding. Do you really want to be down there? We had 4,000 square feet with top light. Yes, I wanted to be down there. And I started making huge paintings, because if I didn't make huge paintings, I would have been all alone in this big space. And then this piece here went to a leisure centre down on the south coast. That was one of my first big site-specific pieces. Then that's a picture of me up in my home studio in London, and there's a picture of me in my East End studio, and there's a picture of me in my Broadway studio in New York, at different points in my life. It was while I was in the studio in London that I had a collaboration with a dancer who came along and said to me, I'd really like to take some of those images that you're working with in your paintings and turn them into stage sets. And I said, if I start to try to make that, I'll be there forever trying to make a huge painting that's 60 feet wide. She said, don't worry about it. We have set painters who can come in and work with you. And by God, they came in and I gave them small pieces of paper that were no bigger than, you know, like this kind of size. And they turned every little smudge, every little pencil mark, every little scrape into a perfect rendition that you could see from a huge distance. And so collaboration here was extraordinary, to be able to make something that amplifies on that level. I had a taste of what musicians feel when their work is put into an amplifier and it's heard across a huge auditorium. Shortly after that, a goldsmith came to me and wanted to turn some of the work into jewellery. This was Cloisonne Enamel. She had never worked with colour before. She wanted to work with colour. I developed some designs and she made these enamels. Now they're in major museums around the world. This was another collaboration, this time done for the Riverside Studios in London, and it was, again, I did a design for this on the top of my mother's washer-dryer with the end of a paint tube, and it was scaled up and turned into this enormous, wonderful set, and it inspired a whole series of large drawings. These are the kind of drawings that I was doing in my Connecticut studio, having now moved to New York, and moved to America. Able to do large exhibitions from the trunk of a car, where each component of paper was no bigger than 3 foot square, and it could be arranged in stacks, and they could be put into the trunk of a car, and one could do an enormous exhibition from pinning the paper to the wall. This is a painting that's in the Time Warner building in New York. So that's like a direct commission for their boardroom. This is also down here in New York, in Boston, at the Millennium Hotel. There's a couple of paintings that are installed down there. You know, the hospitality industry is a huge industry for the arts. This was the first digital piece that I did. It was back in 1994, and I was invited by a digital printmaker to come and work with him. And he said to me, we're going to make some digital pieces based on your work. And I said, I can't even type, let alone use a computer. So he says, think of yourself as a singer. You've got the melody. You're like an unaccompanied singer. We're going to make an instrumental version of what you do. So he said, and I'm going to be your producer. So I thought, okay. So I sat down. He sat here. I sat there. And we started to, and I said, as long as it doesn't look like a painting, I want it to make it look like something that came out of this instrument. And then the Cordova Museum saw us working on this, and they asked us if we would produce a very, very large work for the Cordova Museum in Lincoln. And so we made one which was 120 inches high by 420 inches wide. And in 1994, that was kind of hard to do because the processing power of computers has got so much better than it was then. But we did it, and it was like standing inside the image. This was a project done recently with Apple, and with a company called Artaic, where they teamed us up with different designers around Boston, and we developed ideas into mosaic forms. Artaic have got this ability to take a digital image and turn it into multiple stones, with the smallest stone being about 1/16 of an inch. And it's solid color all the way through. You can even do pavements with this stuff, so that when the trucks come along and they put salt all over the ground, it doesn't destroy them. But they're made with a robot where it constructs the pieces from designs. And so we did this kind of brainstorming at Apple by using this technology. This was a collaboration with a group of nuns who had a center in Connecticut, and they wanted windows without the lead. They didn't want the dark lead. And so and it was an opportunity to take paintings and amplify them into a scale that would be impossible to actually do oneself physically. Because like a small brush mark that's only about this big now becomes 6-7 feet high. So it's a bit like the hand of God has just made a big brush mark across the room. And it was a solution that was developed based on what you do with automobile car windows. With car windows, you have that little bit of color at the top on the glass. That little tint of color has been silk screened onto a layer, which is then needled into the glass, and it creates this safety glass. Well, we actually took the digital images and silk screened them with this special UV cured ink, so that this thing would become light-proof, bulletproof in the glass. It's a completely innovative technique, and nobody's ever done this before because it's just such a lot of work to do. It's a labor of love. This was a project for NYU Medical Center at the Tisch Center on 31st Street in New York for the new CVC Center. They had they finally were able to get all the different cardiology disciplines under one roof, so that people weren't sort of fighting for patients and trying to get them into the wrong procedures. They had a kind of collective umbrella, and to celebrate it, they wanted to produce some art for the waiting room and also for the recovery areas. The inspiration from it was when we were in an operation where we saw somebody go through a balloon catheter that went straight into the left atrium of the heart, and it was looking for the source of an arrhythmia. And it was very moving watching this going on, because it was a 21-year-old girl on a gurney, and they were trying to induce this arrhythmia, but they couldn't get it to go because she was so drugged out. And everybody was in lead aprons, and there were computers all the way around the operating theatre. It felt like it was in an episode of MASH. It was like being on a kind of war front. I came home and looked out the window, and I saw this tree against a field of stars and the moon. And so I took the arteries of the hand and texture mapped the moon, and so began that idea. This was a project that came from the Photonics Center. I made that piece down on the entrance to St. Mary's Street, the big blue piece. Well, the scientists from the engineers from the Army Research Labs saw it and invited me to go down to Adelphi in Maryland, and they said, we'd like something like that here in the Zal building. And I said, well, I don't do war pictures. So they said, it doesn't have to be war pictures. It can be something where you get excited by the science and technology that's going on in the Zal building. The thing that moved me most was remote sensing, with hyperspectral and multispectral imaging from space, and also for power management. And we made this piece here, which, well, it features the terrain of the Chesapeake Bay area. We got the Landsat 7 satellite to take an image, and then we did progressively closer and closer shots to the lab itself. So this is actually right over the lab. That part of it's in hyperspectral. Over here, we're using LiDAR imaging and IR and RF night vision sensors. So basically all the sensors that go into that helicopter are being featured in this artwork. So when I did this, it was a strange kind of experience, because what I wanted to do was to see if I could get my hands on some of the toys that the military are using, because the military get to play with so many great things. I mean, the legend has it that they invented the internet. The Defense Department invented the internet. Did they? I guess they did. And radar. I mean, that came out of a defense appropriation. So the military get to play with lots of great stuff. So I thought, let's go and play, and let's get some of that great stuff, bring it back to Boston, and give it to the students to play with. This is a piece for the Life Science Center, which is just down the road in Cummington Street. This was the piece that's part of that, which is basically the birth of the blues. It's, instead of mitosis, with the egg splits, we've got the egg now filled with music. And the music is Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin, and it's morphing into I've Got You Under My Skin by Cole Porter. And that's what you call evolution. It's the evolution of jazz. And in the background, you've got text from the morbid map, all the little disease genes that you want to silence. And that is the blues. This is for Verizon's corporate headquarters. And it's... This was us building an 8-screen video wall that would be part of a multitude of screens. So the video's not going to play, but that's okay. This is a piece we've just done for the Life Science Center down in Miami, for the University of Miami, all celebrating life sciences. Again, it's a multi-screen video wall, the kind of display that we badly need in Boston. This is the thing that started it all off. This is another piece that you have down on the second floor by Heather Richards, which is the Aqua Victoria jellyfish, which we now know, of course, is the source of the luminescent gene. The protein that develops that luminosity has been, is now isn't it Dr. Shimamura with two colleagues from Brown and Columbia won the Nobel Prize on the isolation of this gene. Well, when she was looking at photonics, she conjectured that wouldn't it be great if the thing that made that thing glow could be used in some kind of medical utility. And that was in 2000. Actually, she started working on it in 1997. These are other pieces that we've done in Photonics Center. When I first came to Boston, I was invited to do that piece down below on the second floor. And I told the director that I would do this for nothing if he would sponsor student artwork for this building. And he said yes. And the Photonics Center have gone on and continue to want to do student-sponsored artwork in this building. And it's not just students, it can be anybody who can get the job done. This was a piece for Sargent College, done by one of the sculpture students. Now we're into a whole thing which I started in CFA called site-specific art. And what we're doing in site-specific art is that I'm asking students to go out around the town and to bear witness to things that they feel the space needs. If you actually see something and you get a hunch that it could be improved, then you need to make an intervention in that space. And it begins as a sketch. And if it goes outside of your domain of expertise, then you have to find the help and you have to find the partners to get the job done. So it starts off with a vision, and then it starts off with really thinking practically about how you can get it done. What the students do is they go to clients, and it could be the Photonics Center or it could be the MBTA, and they say to them, we want to do a research project. We want to find something that will really develop the site that you've got in a very, very visual way. And then we will give it to you for nothing, provided you do a completely professional production on it. So the students get published. They get a bite of the cherry, the thing gets done. This was done for the MBTA stations outside of CFA. They continue to replace these images. The student who did that has now gone down to South Carolina, has been developing murals all over South Carolina. And he developed this wonderful thing called Larnopolis, which is a cardboard city built by a big bunch of high school kids. And it has LED lights flashing inside it, lighting up the city. They continue to do the signs here. And one of the students who developed one of those signs saw an ad in Craigslist for somebody asking for someone to paint one of the deceased firefighters. Sergeant Kelly, who had lost his life over at Ladder 37. And she went down and said, I'll do a picture of him. And she ended up painting 8 of the fallen firefighters. And then they said, would you paint us all? So not really quite knowing what she was getting herself into, she said yes. And she ended up painting the entire rec room up at Ladder 37, which is on Huntington Avenue, opposite the MFA. This is where these guys work out. And she's painting the city of Boston as well as the individual firefighters. But this was a job that was too much for one person. So she recruited 2 friends to get the job done, to get it finally finished. So that's Christy O'Donnell, Anya Samolnikova, and Elizabeth Menges were able to finally get it finished. This is the piece in the Metcalf Science Center that was commissioned by, it was started by Bennett Goldberg from Photonics Center, and it grew into a biology, chemistry, and physics project. This is for the School of Pharmacology, done by Raquel Reichardt, sponsored by Shelley Russick, who's professor of neuroscience. This is another piece by Daniel Roden, who's now an alum and is coming back to do a project on synesthesia for the university. It's based on strange attractors moving through the neural networks of the brain. This is a painting by Ryan Kenny in the Fit Rec Center. This is a painting for Red Bull North America on the left. This is a painting of the sneakers on the Fit Rec Center. And this student learned so much from doing this that he went on to make a proposal in South Carolina to do this building with an image based on the Hadron Collider. And he filmed himself doing it. This is advertising. He put it on YouTube, and he got a call from CERN. And they asked him if he would make a proposal for the Large Hadron Collider. And he made 18 proposals. And they said yes. And there he is at the Hadron Collider visiting it. And there's the final mural that he finished in Geneva. And this was an example of someone just not taking no for an answer. International programs went over there and helped him get a place to stay. So Boston University really helped to facilitate this happening. And CERN went off and found the money, and he was paid to do this as a professional job. This is a really beautiful solution for that came out of the Darwin competition just a couple of years ago, and 100 students in Boston came together with ideas for celebrating the work of Charles Darwin. This is here in the Photonics Center. This is the Writing Center. This is Warren Towers. This is City Convenience Signs. This is a Google game based on Google Trends. It's the survival of the most popular, which is a processing project done by a student from computer science, which creates all these little creatures that run out foraging for food, and they can eat each other if they're more popular than each other. And you can put in different categories, any category you want. This is an interactive system for gesture recognition done with Margaret Betgay in computer science. These are a couple of guys from the boathouse developing a mural for the boathouse. And this is the new student village. And this is a Google map showing where all the work is on our campus. And so that's a really quick run through at a very, very quick pace. But basically, I want to finish this by saying to all of the students here, the way this works is that you need to go off into Boston, and you need to find out what Boston needs. And it can be, I had an idea from a girl who wanted to have a phone booth. She said, I'm so sick of making phone calls with busy streets and in terrible noise. I want to be able to have an air-conditioned luxury phone booth that I can close the door on and be in complete peace and make a quiet call. And she wanted to develop this as an artwork. We could prototype something like that. It's scalable. It could be sold on. There are lots of ideas like that could start life in Boston if we can get together the right kinds of talent. We need engineers, we need computer scientists, we need medical students. It's not just painters and sculptors. We need the whole array. And we need you to start using your imagination, bring in your vision, and bring it to CFA, and we'll put it together so that you actually get the job done. So there's an opportunity. Thank you.